Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Photo Joseph Show. This show is unlike anything I've done before. This is a very special event for educators, for teachers who are suddenly thrust into the need to do online teaching, e-learning, call it what you like, now because of the current global health crisis that we're having right now. I want to give you a little bit of a background of what we're doing and why today, who's going to be on the show, and then I'll bring our panel in and we're just going to get started. So in brief, a fellow named Bob reached out to me, who is a professor at a university in California, saying that just the night before, and this is an email I got on Friday, that just the night before he and all of his colleagues had been told that by Monday they had to be ready to start teaching online. And so it's obviously a big shock to anybody who's never done this before, and what did he need to do to make this happen? And I thought, instead of just giving him a list of gear and so on that he would need, because the discussion is much bigger than that, that I would try to assemble a panel of experts, and that's what we've got today. We have my friend Will Percy, who is actually calling in from China, where he is currently under quarantine and has been for 6 weeks, but he is here for us today. It's 5 o'clock in the morning there, so big special thanks to him. And he is an expert in education. I've worked with him in China and in South Korea, and he's going to be giving us his perspective on what online learning looks like. And then we have Brent Schellender coming in, who is here as an e-learning expert. I don't know Brent personally. He was introduced to me for this discussion, and I know that he's been on local news recently talking about this as well. So hopefully we have a few people here who can help everybody to figure this out. The reason that I wanted to bring this panel together is because this is more than just technical. Technical is just a part of it, and frankly, technical is the easy part of this. Administrative is the other really big challenge here. How do you take a class that is already designed for standing up in front of 30 kids and delivering it and convert that to online teaching? It may be easy in some regards, but may be quite complex in others. How do you do things like keep an eye on the kids in the back of the class who are normally goofing off and not paying attention when they are suddenly not there for you to speak directly to or even look at to realize that they're not engaged? And then the whole psychological part of this and emotional part of this. How do we as teachers and as students, how are we going to handle this complete isolation that we're suddenly under that we obviously have no idea how long this is going to go on for? So that's the basic premise of the discussion today. A little bit of housekeeping. For those of you watching live, if you have any questions that you would like addressed, please drop them into the YouTube chat. We have a moderator in the chat named Jake Guptill. If you have a question that you know you want addressed, tag him in the question. He is going to be moderating those and putting them into a document for me to see so that I can be sure to bring up those questions to the audience. If you're not watching this live, then just drop your comments in and I will do my best to get to them. I will, of course, be keeping an eye on that. Also, I wanted to point out that this show and none of us on this show are sponsored by any of the companies that we might be mentioning today. So anything you hear as far as a recommendation for software, hardware, whatever it might be, this is all coming from us because we've used it, we know it, we love it, we trust it, not because any of us are being paid to say that. So with that said, let me bring on the panel and let's get some introductions going. Bob, let's start with you. You were the one who started this whole thing. Please give us a little background on you, who you are, and what brings you here today.
I'm a biologist in Southern California. I teach all kinds of biology courses at community colleges here in Southern California. Excuse me. And I'm also an entomologist and a botanist and a tech person and a nature photographer, which is how I know Joseph.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Brent.
Yeah, hi. I've been doing e-learning and technical training, conversion of classrooms to online tech for about 20 years now and trying to figure that out. That's both synchronous and asynchronously. So that's both live online and doing e-learning development and projects for in the corporate space. But a lot of this applies to everything that's currently going on in K through 12 and higher ed as well. So it all applies.
Awesome. Thank you. Will Percy, tell us a little bit about you.
I've been involved in EdTech for just over a decade now in China, working on district and local school level rollout for e-learning and creating infrastructure to support both children and faculty. Also just working in an educational space, coaching faculty and children to get the best out of the EdTech. I'm also a principal at a school here in Chengdu, working in an international partnership with New Zealand and the local Chinese government here in a district of Chengdu.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, and special thanks to you for coming in so early in the morning. I really appreciate that. Well, let's start off with the easy stuff. Let's start off with tech. What do we need technically to be able to do e-learning from home other than the obvious of a computer and an internet connection? Software platforms, there's a lot of different streaming platforms out there. There's a lot of different ways that we can do one-to-many teaching. But let me start with you, Will. What is one of the first pieces of tech, first platforms that comes to mind that you would recommend?
Well, I think for me, keeping it simple, if you've not got the backing of a school system or a district system, then I think my go-to would be Zoom. I think it's easy to access, it's affordable, we're able to see what's going on and we're able to stream and talk quite easily. Quite critically for me, just at that really basic level as well, I'm also able to cast a PowerPoint or Keynote session that I want children to see. So at that most basic level of imparting information, making presentations, Zoom would be my go-to.
Okay, and that's zoom.us for anyone who's not familiar with it. In fact, that is what we're using right now. The 4Grid that you're looking at is through Zoom, and you can have up to 100 participants, I believe, so that should cover most classrooms, and students can be logged in as video like this so you can see them, or they can not be sharing a camera. I know you can share documents through it. Like you said, you can share a keynote slide presentation, obviously your computer screen, whatever you like. And I know one of the reasons that we all like this is it's very affordable. It's actually free for up to 100 participants, but you're limited to a 40-minute session if you have more than one person in there, more than two people rather. If you need the larger package, then it's only $15 a month. Brent, do you have any alternative to that you would recommend?
Well, I was just going to say, I think like Google Hangouts and Google Meet, I think they've even opened up, at least for the next few weeks, one of their the live streaming pieces of the Google Suite for folks to use. So that's one. Another one, I don't think it's free, but there's this great tool called Flipgrid. It reminds me a lot of in the early days, there was a tool called Blab that was
Okay.
one of the earliest sort of live streaming collective types of tools where you could get a whole bunch of people and their video images on the window at the same time. But that was only around for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't remember exactly, but Flipgrid is uses the same tech, same type of tech, and
Okay.
it's used a lot in schools. And so if you've got access to that, that would be great. But I would think from a free perspective right now, under these current circumstances, the Google offering, because a lot of schools are on the Google Suite. So
Sure. Yeah, that's true. When it comes to document sharing, I know that a lot of schools, my own kids' schools, are all using the Google platform, and that allows them to share documents easily. And so, if there's any integration with that, that probably doesn't hurt. Will, do you know, is there integration with Google Docs with Zoom? I know they have integration with Dropbox.
That would be the one question not to ask me, Joseph. Google's not available over here at the moment, my friend.
Oh, that's
so
right. Oh, gosh.
that would be a pretty difficult integration to pull off.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so I know one of the challenges there is, of course, sharing the documents and things like pre-existing Keynote slides or PowerPoint slides, PDF documents, and so on. And again, Zoom does allow you to share that on screen quite easily and to share the documents back and forth. Let's talk things like cameras and microphones and so on. How important is it, and Brent, I'm going to ask you this one first, how important is it to have, let's say, a good quality camera and good quality microphone, and those are, of course, two separate things, but how important is that versus just using the webcam that's on your computer and the built-in microphone, and is there any real value when it comes to this to getting, to upping your gear quality a bit?
yeah, so I have this conversation around quality all the time with a lot of folks in my personal networks and in learning and development across the board. And I think again, I'm trying to sort of frame all of my answers in where we're at right now and what people
Sure.
need. I don't want people to, or teachers to feel like, oh, I have to go out and spend money. I would say that it is perfectly fine to use that built-in camera that's on your laptop and the built-in microphone. Even if that's all you've got and you're under the gun, I think it's fine. I think
It
it's
works.
absolutely fine just to get yourself started. If you can, go ahead and get yourself a webcam and attach it. A USB webcam like the Logitech C920 is sort of the workhorse of the industry, as I always say.
Sure.
But there's other brands, other ones out there as well. A lot of those come with mics built in, and that's just so in one purchase, you can level up your camera and level up your mic input all at the same time. So that's one way if you wanted to step it up. But I would say just, immediately, just right out of the box. The really cool thing too about a lot of these tools is that you can just use your mobile device, your mobile phone, and just go live right from the mobile device even and produce. I don't know about Zoom. I don't know if you can only participate in a Zoom meeting or if you can actually
I
produce
think you
one.
can produce, I think you can host from it, but it's going to be a lot harder to share documents and stuff like that
Oh,
from it.
certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
But
if
I
you're
know.
teaching, you really should be focusing on being on a desktop computer.
Yeah.
When it comes to the cameras, you mentioned the Logitech C920, whatever that one is. It's under $100. It's a quite a good
Mhm.
little webcam for what it is, with a decent microphone in it. Definitely a step up from whatever might be built into your computer. But I know a lot of teachers will have decent cameras, DSLRs, mirrorless cameras that they might want to use. And so I want to throw that out there as a technical opportunity for those who have those kind of cameras and do want to use them. The interface to get from a camera into the computer is relatively inexpensive. You can probably about $100 and up, and that'll give you the ability to take that HDMI signal out of your camera, turn it into a USB signal in your computer that then pretty much any app is going to see like a webcam. It's just going to basically treat it like a webcam. And then any microphone that you connect to that camera will just route the audio through that HDMI signal as well. The only thing you need to watch out for is that you have something called a clean HDMI signal. A lot of cameras don't output clean HDMI, so you get menus on them and stuff like that, but the better cameras certainly will. So, you know, a lot of camera enthusiasts out there, there's a lot of people who already have gear like that, so a little bit more purchase will give you the ability to get that streaming. We have a question coming in about how do you get audio quality this good out of Zoom, because whenever he uses it, this is from Aaron Perecki, says whenever he uses it, it sounds really compressed. What you guys who are watching this live are seeing is not actually the Zoom feed. So let me give a little bit of a tech of what you're watching here. We are having this conversation over Zoom. However, I am mirroring my screen where I'm full screen with this 4-grid conversation and then streaming that through YouTube Live using the A10 Mini as a switcher to switch between this 4-grid and the intro that you saw in the beginning and so on. I sound the way I sound because I've got a boom microphone that's routed through a proper DSLM camera. It's an old GH4 that I'm using for this. And so that's where that audio quality is coming from. Now, what the other 3 people on the panel are hearing is possibly not as good as what you on YouTube are hearing from me because Zoom may be compressing it more, but I think none of them are having a problem hearing me. So the quality may not be fantastic, but it's definitely good enough. One other thing I'll point out, and I almost did this show live this way, is that Zoom does have the ability to simultaneously stream your show live to Facebook and YouTube or any custom platform that you want. But I opted not to go that way because I wanted a little bit more control on my end, and they only stream out at 720p, and that just kind of hurts my soul to go that low resolution. So, so I'm broadcasting this at 1080p, taking control on my side of it. But you certainly can, just with a couple of clicks, stream your group conversation with Zoom to YouTube or to Facebook, which is definitely pretty nice. So that's where that's going. Let's get into moving past technical a little bit. Let's see actually if there's anything else. Oh, lighting. Let's actually talk about lighting a little bit and acoustic treatment for a room, because that does make a big difference. Will, let's, and I'm going to pick on you because you're in probably the worst lighting situation we've got here today. But lighting importance, obviously, nice lighting, it looks bit great, but kind of like this same conversation with cameras and audio, how important is it really? Would you put any stock in that being something people should really pay attention to?
Yeah, I'm going to go with that first range of comments. You know, let's not let technical pieces put people off engaging in online learning. You know, people are being thrust in at the deep end. We don't know how easy it is for them to get out and get around at the moment. So, you know, go with what you've got is my first piece of advice. You know, you've got to. From my perspective, I'm on the other side of the country from all of my gear right now. I came back to China from a business trip to Atlanta and walked straight into basically a quarantine situation. So, you know, we're talking about this. What do you do with tech? I'm sat with my MacBook in front of me. I'm using the inbuilt camera. I'm using the inbuilt mic because I've got no gear in front of me. So, you know, a couple of things that you can do. Make sure if you've got lights, you turn them on. So make sure that you're as well lit as you possibly can be. You know, that's really important. So make sure that you are lit. In terms of sound and quality, you know, it can be a little bit difficult for educators because let's not forget they've got their own families. You know, so they've got their own families running around. So what can you do to, without even thinking about treatment of a room, the first thing is to let people know you're streaming, to let people know that you're in a space where you're teaching, and to try and just get your family to gather around you and support you in doing that.
Yeah.
So I think for me, you know, first things you can do, make sure you've got a space set up where you're going to stream from, that you can try and control the light a little bit from, that people know is a space that you're going to stream from, and that will be respected as a space that they need to be quiet around. So I think, you know, for me, let's not get put off. Let's not get put off getting out there and streaming and doing those things because you think you need equipment. You know, we can do it quite simply with what we've got around us. Now, of course, beyond that, though, you know, one of the things I've done recently when I have had to stream and when I've had to teach online is to try and add a few extra lights where necessary as well. So to pull in some lamps and those kind of things, just stuff I've got around the house already.
Yeah, it is amazing what you can do with, let's call them found objects in your house as far as lighting goes. And I've done shows from, or recorded videos in hotel rooms where you obviously don't have a whole lot of control, but I've done things like pulling table lamps and floor lamps around, maybe taking off the cover so I can get more light, or putting up a sheet to diffuse it. And it's remarkable what you can do when you get a little bit clever, you start thinking about the lights that you do have available. I'd also want to point out the background. You'll notice the variety of backgrounds that we have on the show right now. So I have a custom background that is built specifically for live streaming. Brent's background, I'm guessing, is as well, because it's very, very meticulous, very perfectly laid out in there. But then Bob and Will don't have a custom background, but notice that what they are using is a blank wall, a nice clean wall. Bob's has a nice color cast to it. It's just simple, it's clean. It doesn't have to be fancy. And if you don't have a really nice background setup, you're better off just doing it against a wall. Don't make it distracting, have it nice and clean, and also avoid backlighting. If you have a window, like a window going to outside back here, that's going to look really bright, it's going to mess up the camera's exposure, it's not going to look clean. Try to avoid that. It looks like Brent's got a window to his left there, so he's got nice natural light coming in. Yeah, it can be quite simple to set it up so that it looks maybe not amazing, but it doesn't look bad. But if you don't pay attention to it, then it can look bad pretty quickly, and that can be distracting. It's definitely nice to have that quality in there. And acoustically, Will, you're talking about having other people in your home try and respect that you're doing this, trying to keep people quiet. Internet connection is going to be key. Try to be wired, first of all, not wireless. That's a big one. You really want to try and stay on Ethernet instead of being wireless. You get a lot more dropouts on wireless. And as Bob experienced just before we were about to go live, he was noticing some dropouts, and it sounded like someone else in the house was watching Netflix. And so sometimes you may have to go to someone else in the house and say, I got a class to teach, could you please not? I need the internet. It's a big part of it. Any other tech things that we want to throw out there before we get into the bigger, stronger questions?
I'm kind of curious. I think Brent and Will also mentioned already that you can throw up a keynote presentation while doing this. I've got no idea how to do that. Is it something we could go over real quickly, or just maybe a sentence so I could go investigate that later? I don't see an option to do that in
Sure.
Zoom.
It's basically screen sharing. Will, do you want to take that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a little share icon that you've got available to you in Zoom. So you click the share icon, and then really there's two options. And I think these can be quite important actually, because maintaining your privacy and sharing what you want to while you're streaming and not oversharing, as it were, is a key consideration. So one of the great things in Zoom is that I can choose the window to share. So what I will do when I'm doing this, I'll open my Keynote, make sure that I've got my deck in order and that I'm ready to stream. Then I'll hit the share icon and then just choose to share my Keynote window. And so one of the great things for Zoom, and one of the reasons I like to use it in that kind of situation, is that it's allowing me to choose exactly what I'm sharing and to have complete control over that, so I can maintain my own privacy as well and make sure that I'm getting kind of a clean transition for the people that are watching between me, the slides that are being shown, and anything else like that. So it's a really easy thing to do in Zoom.
Let me just show this real quick. I know you guys, my audience or my panel won't see this, but the audience can. You're looking at the Zoom interface right now. When I click the share button, this is what pops up. And I've got two screens on here, which really does help, but you can see I could share desktop 1 or 2. There's a whiteboard I could actually share in an iOS device via AirPlay or via cable. And then you'll see every window that is currently open. I can select any one of those windows and it will share just that window. So if you have a slide deck on a separate monitor, then you can make that clean transition that Will's talking about. But when you're dealing with your classroom, it's not quite so important to have that super clean, polished transition. You know, if you just say to them, all right, let's look at the slides, and they see your desktop for a moment, and they see you open a Keynote, and they see you hit play, it's not the end of the world. You know, it may not be the most polished presentation, but it works, and they're going to get the information, which is obviously what really matters in there. Robert, does that answer your question?
Yep.
You'd also asked in our prepared questions about how you can take questions. So let's talk about that side of it. Interacting with the students, obviously in a real classroom, student can raise their hand and ask a question anytime they want. How do you handle that in this kind of one-to-many broadcast type situation? Brent, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, well, there's, I think every tool has its own variants of this, but a lot of times there's a raise your hand button in whatever tool you're using. And so users can click that and it will flash or some kind of icon or something will appear for the person presenting to be able to see who that's currently in the room is doing that. I would point out too that we were talking about engagement and whatnot. Zoom has a really great tool where if somebody goes off of Zoom into another app, let's say they're checking their email or something while you're presenting, you can see that there's an icon on for each one of the people that are in your room that shows you whether or not they're focused on the screen or not. So
Okay, I know that GoToWebinar has that. I didn't know that Zoom had that as well.
yeah, apparently it does. I have not used it in Zoom myself, but I did see somebody in the chat mention it, and I heard somebody mention it in one of my shows this past week, talking about it. So
Okay.
and maybe they meant GoToMeeting. I'm not sure, but it's I think it's a fairly simple piece of tech, and if one has it, the others will probably shortly come out with it.
Sure, sure. It's basically just which app is frontmost. If Zoom or whatever the broadcast app is in frontmost, then you know they may not be paying attention. Good. And I think, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but in a situation like this, let's say that we're using Zoom and I've got a class of 30 kids and they're all logged in. They can, even if they don't have their cameras, if they have a microphone, I could say, okay, Bob, what's your question? And they can vocalize it. We can hear them or even potentially see them. And I think that would be very helpful for the kind of just keeping everybody comfortable and feeling like we're still in this together, like we were in the classroom, as opposed to a more distant, I just have to type my question in kind of a thing. I don't know how manageable that is when you've got 30 or 50 people watching at once, but technically it can be done. It'd be interesting to see how that would work. Do any of you have experience trying to run it that way and actually letting the people watching ask questions over video?
Yeah, it's something that's been done quite a lot over here, Joseph. But I think I'd pick up a couple of things just from the recent experience that colleagues have had. I mean, they've been doing this for about a month now and teaching online. And so a couple of things that I'd throw out there as challenges. First, let's not get caught up in the idea that it has to be a mass number of people that we're actually engaging with and presenting to. One of the things that educators have done across here is actually, rather than feeling they've got to stream for an hour and do 45-minute to an hour lesson, they say, okay, it's going to be a little bit more difficult if we're streaming to everybody, but let's do a shortened lesson. Let's get the content out there and let's make the presentations. And then they're using the rest of the time to actually engage with smaller groups. So they're doing tutorials and discussion sessions with 5 or 6 people. And I've found that that's been really effective for the students as well. So the idea that there is some talk content, but actually then breaking down into smaller discussion groups. That's if you've not got access to software that does allow for you to do that. So be aware that there are some software solutions out there that do allow you to actually break out into separate rooms so that you can interact with students.
What would those be?
Well, I'd have to have a look at which ones are available in the States for free, but my favorite go-to with tech support is Big Blue Button. And that's a great piece that a school can support with, but that'll allow you to break kids out, allow you to go into separate rooms with them. The other way that I like to kind of get this kind of interaction going as well, we were talking about PowerPoint and Keynote decks, but is actually to build in some polling and to build in some questioning into what's happening. So being able to use kind of apps that allow you to put up a link, the QR code, and I'll often monitor that on my mobile device as I'm presenting. So you'll get partway through a presentation, you can ask a question, you can get feedback that way as well.
Okay.
So really 2 strategies I'd pull out. The polling's important, but one of the things that educators have done across here as well is not let themselves get trapped into the mindset of a standard period's 45 minutes, an hour, I've got to perform for that amount of time. What they're now doing is saying, okay, let's cut down that time. Let's think about how I'm presenting and what the kids are getting out of it. And now I'm going to use the rest of the time to actually do one-on-one meetings, to do small group meetings, and then they find it easier to generate some of that kind of discussion piece that we were talking about.
Okay. That's a good lead up to one of the other topics that we needed to discuss, which was the duration of a class. And if we're used to having 6 or 7 or however many hours a day of school, is it realistic to expect kids to sit in front of their computer for that many hours a day doing education, as opposed to flipping through memes, which we all know kids can do for about 20 hours a day if you let them. But for actually sitting through education, is can we expect, and you, I know, have experiences with this now, Will, can we expect the kids to maintain the attention for the same duration that they would in school when they're just sitting at home, or do we need to somehow accommodate for that?
I'm going to come back and say, how much attention do they actually spend when they're in school anyway? When you've got them in the room and you're trying to engage them. So, I think we've got the answer there almost. I'll tell you what we found over here. And if I can deal with it with kind of a couple of age ranges, really. With the younger kids, primary age kids, we found as long as they've got somebody with them in the home, supporting them in their learning, then actually they can stay quite engaged. But one of the lovely things I've seen over here at the primary age is actually the primary teachers keeping things active. And I've watched PE teachers actually deliver PE lessons live streamed. So dancing, getting the kids doing exercises. And what they're doing is sending out a video first and then asking the kids after they've done it to get the grandparents, the parents to actually post a video of them doing it. So in terms of engagement, they've kind of broken that invisible wall and made sure there's a community feel and that kids are actually doing something. So I've seen primary school kids massively engaged. As we've gone up the age range, as you might expect, we found it harder and harder to keep the kids engaged. And so a couple of strategies that we've seen over here is the first one that I mentioned. So breaking down the time, not feeling that you've got to perform on camera for an hour, but actually breaking it out and doing one-on-one sessions, small group sessions to ensure that they're engaged. The other piece that's really happened over here is making sure there's a team effort in monitoring what's going on with the kids' homework, making sure there's parental communication, and really trying to engage the parents with ensuring that the kids are where they should be.
Yeah.
Now, a piece of advice with that is just like we said to the teachers, set aside a space that you're going to do this in, is actually saying to the parents, set aside a space where your child can study effectively.
Right.
Make sure that there's ground rules in place and make sure that there's some non-negotiables in place around how they're going to use tech, about how they're going to engage. And that'll help the educators actually do their job and engage with the students as well. Yeah. But it's tough, Joseph. I'm going to tell you, I've got colleagues that started with hair at the start of this process, and I think that they're losing it as they go, and just trying to chase and follow up kids. And so as a last point, just picking up on your point of how long do we do sessions for, one of the things that I'm finding is that colleagues are reporting that this does up their workload. It's not just about doing the online session, it's about chasing the kids, it's about preparing materials. So the thing that's happened over here, everybody started gung-ho. They were all at it. We're going to do 8 hours streaming a day. It's just going to be like school. And where everybody's got to is a few hours a day, probably about 4 hours maximum, allowing the kids to rest, setting offline tasks for the kids, but then giving the educators time to do the administrative pieces of chasing up, following up, doing the marking, and all of the things we have to do as well to support.
That's good. It's good to hear. Brent, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned so many different things there. I think one of the things that we echo quite a bit in even just adult learning is have them do things. People don't like to sit for too long to just watch. Get them involved, ask them to do things. And it's okay to do a live session where you don't talk. I think the immediate gut reaction is I have to put up my PowerPoints or whatever, and then I have to lecture for an hour. And the teacher, has to fill all the time with something. And you don't, and it's going to take a little bit of redesign, I think, on the instructors' parts to kind of figure out what that balance is between how their course material looks different delivered online versus how they would do it in a classroom. But I'll tell you one thing, a consultant that I talked to, and I just dropped her link in here, her name's Cassie Labori. And one of the things that she's discovered time and time and time again, teachers or instructors who have always been in the classroom, when she gets with them and coaches them on moving their course online, then they become better teachers in the classroom, because all of the things that you actually learn how to do and are kind of forced to do to get engagement are actually the same things that you should be doing in your classroom to get engagement and to do all of that. It's just that we kind of fall back on those old ways. But
Mm-hmm.
people often move online and find that they've become a better instructor in person for those elements when they've learned all of these new techniques and all the new things that they can do online. They start incorporating it more with the classroom stuff. So one of the things I just really want to express throughout our time here is just not to be afraid, and not to, this doesn't take away people's jobs, or it doesn't mean we don't need teachers anymore. This is the part that I think people fear, is that the technology is going to take away my livelihood as a teacher in a school if it becomes automated or whatever. And this is just the first step in that horrible direction. And it's not, right? We've been around, technology and e-learning and online based learning has been around for decades now, and we've been working really hard at it. And you know what? We still have teachers and we still need them. And that human interface and that human element, what we're doing right here, will always be necessary. So people should just not be afraid to get out there and just give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to just real quickly bring up the screens that you were talking about actually, I guess I can't do that. Let me back out of this real quick. I want to show this to the live audience. These links I have already put into the chat. So there we go. I've dropped these into the chat. So this is an article on LinkedIn. And again, link is in the chat. And for those of you not watching live, this will be in the comments down below. And this is this resource page, this Airtable resource page. This has a huge amount of information on here. So again, both these links are already in the chat, and they will be in the room down below, in the comments down below. What do you call it? Description. That's what I was looking for. The description down below as well. Alrighty, let's bring everybody back up. Okay, real quick before we jump back into, I want to remind people who are watching live, if you have questions that you want answered, please do drop them into the chat. There's someone in there named Jake Guptill who is moderating for me. If you tag him in your question, he'll be sure to grab that and drop it into a document for me to look at. So please, if you have questions, get them in there. And if you're not watching live and you have questions, do drop them into the comments, and we'll do our best to address those down the road. We will, of course, be watching this and monitoring the comments ongoing. The last bit of the tech thing that I see in my notes here was about recording the session. How do you do that? And fortunately, these platforms make it really easy. Zoom allows you to automatically record just one button, and I think you can have it record automatically as soon as you start a session so you don't forget. You have that recording there and you're ready to go. If you happen to be streaming to YouTube, then of course you've got that YouTube backup as well. But yeah, the platforms will do their own recording. That makes it really quite easy to do. And there's nothing special you need in there.
When it records under Zoom, is it an MP3 file? Is it a movie file?
A movie file. It'll record, basically it records what you're broadcasting. So whatever you broadcast gets recorded. If you wanted to take it to kind of next level and really have a much higher quality thing that you could re-edit later, you can record what we'd call ISOs, that'd be isolated sources. So you could have, let's say, ScreenFlow that is recording your screen, so whatever's on there gets recorded. And then if you're using a camera like this, you could have it recording the video of you separately, and then you could bring those into an editor and cut them up and cut in your PDFs and your slides and everything else. And you can go to that level if you want to. It's obviously not necessary for most things, but just so people are aware, that certainly is something you can do. So tools like ScreenFlow to record your screen, just recording in camera, and then you're editing in something like Final Cut Pro or Premiere or even iMovie. And even ScreenFlow as a recording tool to record your screen, that allows you to edit as well. So there's lots of options out there. Any other favorites for recording the screen, Brent or Will?
Oh, well, Snagit's a great one, right? That's sort of the go-to in our corporate industry. I mean, there's a lot of different ones out there if you search for like free screen grabbing tools and whatnot. But that's kind of the go-to. And right now they're actually giving it away for free. So if you're a teacher, an educator, and you're looking to do that, the link is right in there in that Airtable, the very first one up at the top. The TechSmith folks there, a fantastic group of folks,
nice.
Cutting that loose. So nice of them. So check that out.
Okay. Very good. All right, let's move on to a bit more of an administrative conversation. One of them, we've kind of discussed this a little bit already, but converting a class that is designed to be delivered in person, standing up in front of a classroom full of kids, to something that you do online, outside of the obvious you're not there, what other things do educators need to think about when it comes to getting ready to do their classes online versus in person? Will, let me throw it to you first. What's something that jumps out at you that people may not be necessarily thinking of right away if they've never done this before, and they go to do that first class and they realize, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I'm totally unprepared for X because I'm online now instead of in front of people.
Yeah, I mean, it might sound a little bit strange, but the last thing I worry about is being online and presenting. The first thing I worry about is what does the workflow look like? So this is an educational experience. I'm going to need to share files. I'm possibly going to need to get homework in from the kids. And so what I'm really worried about is, in my specific environment, what does that look like? Obviously, if you've got Google available to you, there's a whole load of ways to do that and processes there. But I just want to make sure that as I'm presenting, as I'm doing that thing online, that I'm not making things more complex, because the kids are going to want to know, how do I access these files? How do I get these resources? Great, you've just given me a task. How do I hand that in to you? And then just as importantly, how are you going to get feedback back to the students as well? So those are kind of some of the key things that I want to think about as I'm planning the experience for the students. Just remembering that the online presentation is only one portion. You've got all of the usual administrative burden that you'd have if you're standing in front of the kids in the classroom anyway, but less of the opportunity to discuss it with them and to negotiate and bargain the way things are going to happen. So you need to be prepared.
Yeah, it goes into what you're saying earlier about it doubling the workload. It really is going to be more work, not less.
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be programmed in right up front, right? You need to spend as much time as you need to get the classroom, the students, whether they're adults or kids, to get comfortable with the platform you're using, with the tool that you're using. If you know, you need to go into this. I think for folks that are trying to transition for the first time, you need to be okay and set the bar a little bit lower on your instructional goals, and get them comfortable, right? The learning isn't going to happen anyways if everybody's stressed out, and just if the software and the technology is getting in the way. Your goal is to help them get to a point where the technology sort of starts to disappear, and now they're just engaged with you and the content that you're presenting. And that takes time to get anyone, doesn't matter what age they are, to get to that point. And you may have a small group of kids where it goes really fast, and you get them all there on the same page. Boom. All right. You're jumping into instruction. Or you may have a larger group that is just really struggling with the tech and having a hard time. And these are all, things that we need to kind of expect, and just kind of know that it's part of the process. This is a transition, just like anything else. We can't just snap our fingers and make education just magically happen because the technology's there. There's a culture shift. There's a comfort level shift that we all have to go through. And I know it's going to be hard because there's still expectations that, the students get to a certain point by a certain day, and there's certain things that have to be met, and there's tests coming up for the end of the school year and all that kind of stuff. And I get that, and I empathize with folks, but just try to understand that you've just, it's a natural part of the process that you get people to get comfortable with the tool first. You'll be able to run a lot faster once you focus on that comfort level and make sure you've got everybody at the same pace, the same rate, understanding. Then you can jump into the content, as opposed to every time you start, you have to stop and dial back because somebody didn't get one part or one thing, and then stop. You go again. Oh wait, now we have to stop because I forgot to show them how to do this. You get them into it, get them going with it, and then you'll be fine. And there's some really fun ways you can do that. You can actually present content in your instruction of how to make the tool work. Right. So if you get really creative with this, you can figure out ways of doing that where you're squeezing in content while you're teaching them how to engage with the interface.
Yeah.
I think it's also, I'd echo what you're saying. Absolutely. I think it's really important. I think there's a trap that we fall into as well of imagining that because kids are so tech literate that they're just going to get this and be able to do it. And so I think it's important to recognize we need to teach this. But one of the things that we found over here as well, depending on the age range of students that we're talking about, is that actually you might not be worried about whether the kid can do it or not. If it's a primary level classroom, a lower middle school classroom, you may be putting this burden on the parents or grandparents or caregivers that are around them. And so one of the things that we've had to do over here is to very proactively make sure that there's information out there for caregivers and parents about how to ensure that they can help the child hand in work, access the live streaming, and get in there. So, one of the things that we've done is very proactively before the session started or quite soon after they have, getting unambiguous, clear information out to the home about how you can access this and about how you can get things handed in as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good.
Would now be too premature for us to talk about accessibility?
Let's do it. Sure. It's definitely on the list to get into. So let's jump into that. Go ahead, Brent. How do you want to start that
well,
off?
I mean, I don't know how deeply we want to get into it because I just all of a sudden caught myself and realized we need to keep this simple. And these are people, these are teachers just getting into the first time. But I mean, if you've got, users in your classroom, or if you think you might have users in accessing your course materials or your live stream that, hard of hearing, hard of seeing, there's color blindness issues, there's, all of those different elements. Okay, how are you going to address that? How do you approach that? How do you, engage with them if maybe they're unable to because of whatever physical handicap or whatnot? Maybe they can't jump into the chat and just type something in really quickly, so how do we, we just need to be aware, I think, as well, that's something that our teachers are going to have to deal with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that there's any specific technical thing to discuss on that as an overarching topic. It is going to be unique, and you are going to have to figure out a specific thing for a specific situation. I would imagine just like in the live classroom, where if you do have a student who has special needs, that you have to figure out how to accommodate that, and there's no easy answer. It's going to depend on the situation specifically. I don't know that there's anything on a kind of a high level conversation that we can address on there. I don't know, Will, is there anything you can think of that we can throw out there? It's okay if you say no, not really.
No, I think it's really important that was raised. Ensuring that our classrooms are accessible to everybody, whether they're physical classrooms or online classrooms. That's something that's just got to be out there. As educators, we need to make sure we're accessible.
Yeah,
Joseph, I love the comment you made, about every situation is unique, and we're going to have to find unique ways to do it. So I'd make sure I was speaking to the student and their family to talk about how it will be accessible for them. Disability hopefully hasn't just arisen overnight, so they're going to have strategies. They've probably got technology solutions in place themselves.
Sure.
And so I'd be wanting to talk about how I was providing content that will interface well with whatever solutions that they've got in place, and making sure that we were just talking about that and putting strategies together to make that happen. Yeah. There's a great community out there. I don't know if people are familiar with the Apple Distinguished Educator Group, but there's an absolutely amazing group of people out there that specialize in supporting students with disability. And so the ADE group, Apple Distinguished Educators, great team to reach out to if you're having difficulty with that as well.
And that's as a teacher, as an educator at a school, if you're having some questions or issues trying to figure out how to make this work, you can reach out to ADE.
Yeah. Absolutely. You'll find these guys on Twitter. You'll find them in other spaces. Just be aware that you don't have to have all of the answers yourself. There's a great community of educators out there. Obviously, I'm part of that Apple Educator group, so I've got an affinity with them. But I know that they're really happy to receive those kind of help, kind of questions, and give help and support. The reason I mentioned that is that disability was something that I was struggling with, how to support in an e-learning environment, and that was the community I reached out to.
Okay.
But just remember, you're not by yourself.
Yeah.
There's loads of teaching communities out there.
Yeah, that's a great point to make, and it does kind of lead into our last part of our conversation. But So we will come back to it, but I do want to point out that that's a really great point to say that we aren't alone. There are tens of thousands of other instructors who are in the same boat as every one of us are, and have to figure out how to deal with this. And there are, outside of big groups like the ADE, I'm sure that there are other support groups that people can jump in on, and tech rooms and chat forums that people can get involved in. Does anything come to mind with any of you of a resource that people should consider outside of ADE, obviously being one of the bigger ones that people might want to look into?
I love ISTE. ISTE have always got resources out there, lots of clear guides for educators that want to use technology,
What
and a
is it?
very active community.
How do you spell
ISTE,
it?
I can't remember the acronym. They're US based, and they're just a wonderful group.
Okay. Okay, we'll see. I'm going to ask our moderator to see if he can figure out what that is. We can get a link and pop that up on the screen. Brent, anything else that jumps out at you that people might want to consider?
Yeah, no, I'm glad we brought this up, because that was one of the things that I've been focusing on lately a lot, is the idea of communities. And it's not just building a community around your classroom. You can do that. And that's a fantastic way to engage kids too, is give them more, control and access to being a part of the learning process, instead of us teachers pushing content and thinking that we should control everything. Trying as best we can to give them a little bit of creative engagement and asking questions, and offering up suggestions and how we can do it. But then again, there are communities that teachers can reach out to. Obviously, teachers that are into photography obviously follow you, right? And learn some of the tips and tricks on doing that. If you want to learn about live streaming video, they'll follow you. There's other teachers out there that have YouTube channels and have started communities, and they're connected. So I think now more than ever, with everybody working from home, right, socially isolated,
Yeah.
and now more than ever, finding those online communities and that presence, and still having that connection with other people that are interested in doing the same things you do is more important. And there's so much out there. You just have to get out there and look.
Yeah, there absolutely is. We've got that website up here. Let me just pull that up real quick here. The ISTE site, so those who want to see that can. Let's get up on the screen. Here we go. So ISTE, this stands for International Society for Technology in Education. So ISTE.org, definitely check that out. That sounds like another fantastic resource that you might want to look into. So again, we'll drop the links for that down below, but there you go for that. All right, thank you very much. Okay, let's see here. Let me take a look at my notes here. Labs, that was a question that Bob had. We're talking about taking these classes that are maybe normally 45 minutes to an hour long, and maybe you have to make them a little bit shorter. But what about a science lab situation? Suddenly you're used to having a multi-hour laboratory session where clearly you can't dissect a frog over the internet, kind of a thing. Like, how do you manage that? And I think one of Bob's questions was, does it make sense to record a session, a video of he himself doing it that the kids just watch? Is that the best way? Is that the only way? What other options are there for that kind of lab environment?
I would think there's a lot of interactive software and whatnot out there, but again, that takes money, and there's always that aspect of it. And then you have to get your, financial approvals from your school and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm, I don't know, positive or negative, one way or the other, I'm a big fan of just recording stuff that you do and sharing it with people. And, the fact that people can hear it and see it, I think is fantastic. It doesn't have to be pro level stuff. It can be you and your mobile device, and you point it, get a cheap tripod online or something, and stick your mobile device on it and point it at whatever you're doing, and you just click record and just do it, and then send that out. It doesn't have to be perfect. People get so hung up on, I want to be professional like Photo Joseph. I want it, if it doesn't look like what he's doing, I don't want to do it, because that's the right way. Well, the right way is whatever grabs that content, that thing that you're doing and that you want to share, and you can get it to them, right? So often speed trumps quality, and I get pushback on that phrase all the time. But when somebody I'd rather have a an amateurish video of something that I need and can't find anywhere else
Mm-hmm.
than sit around and wait until the professional version comes out, right?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I would highly encourage folks to lab situations, physical things that you're trying to teach people, record it. We should be recording all of that kind of stuff anyways.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And we, especially in the YouTube community, we're very, very guilty of that, of trying to always make it better. And you're looking at other people who are doing it better than you are, and you go, oh, if only I could do it like that channel, then my stuff would really be good. And at the end of the day, yes, it is great to be able to produce a high quality show with great lighting, great camera, great sound, and all that. But at the end of the day, what matters most is content. You could have the most beautifully produced show in the world, and if you're just blathering about something that nobody cares about, then nobody cares. But if you have really, really good content, even if it's not the best quality, people will watch it, and that's ultimately what matters the most. It's nice if you can do
And
both.
the thing too is that even if there's just 5 people out there that got some value out of what you did, that's 5
Right.
more people that got to see something they couldn't see anyplace else, or that they couldn't hear anyplace else. And really, how much time did it take you to do it? It was something you were doing anyways, because you're a teacher and that's what you do. So just record yourself doing it, or get a friend or something to record you doing what you do and you talking about it, and
Right.
then just post it out there. Somebody somewhere will stumble across it and go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
Not
Absolutely.
everybody will, but that's the beauty of the internet right now. It's the Wild West. And it's
Yeah.
So as far as delivering that, because I've thought about doing that, absolutely. And watching Joseph's wonderfully produced videos makes me jealous. And I'm one of those people that wants to go all the details. But Brett, you got me thinking, and Will, you got me thinking, I'm just going to whip out the iPhone, put it on a tripod, and just use it as a document camera to just do things by hand.
Yeah.
Dissecting a flower, whatever we're doing, post it on there. I'm going to start doing that. Now, where do I post that? Should I get a YouTube channel and just start putting it there so it's easy for people to get? Or should I only have it in my learning management system? Like, we use a product called Canvas here in California.
Oh, yeah.
That lets me do that. I can post that stuff. I'm just wondering, should I just leave it on Canvas, or should I go for a YouTube channel?
I would say
assuming
go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, I'm assuming from my perspective that there's no conflict with the organization that you're in. Get it out there, man. And I'd come back to this, even if there's only 5 people that benefit from it. But if you're getting it out in a live environment and showing it in as many places as you can, then you could be impacting the lives of a lot of kids that are out there, and perhaps other faculty that just don't have maybe the courage or the ability to get stuff out there at the moment. Let's share. Let's make sure that we are flagging these things, and we're making sure that people know that they can access what we've got out there as well, would be my take on it.
Yeah.
And you seem like a very brave guy. Like you don't mind getting some stuff out there, and you would put it out there. You, just by doing it and putting it on YouTube, you might inspire other people to go, oh, he used an iPhone for that. I've got an iPhone. I can do that too. Maybe it doesn't look exactly like Joseph's quality, but hey, I can make my stuff look like Bob's. I got the iPhone. I can do that, and then they get their stuff out there. And, to Joseph's point, we do level each other up though, right? At a certain point, once you've recorded enough with your iPhone, you start to get really darn good at recording it with your iPhone. But then you realize, oh, I'm going to step it up. I'm going to buy a little bit of gear here, a little bit of gear there. And next thing you know, you are at that level. But you don't get there by just snapping your fingers, and you don't get there by buying the expensive equipment. It takes practice, and it takes doing it. Just like we're talking about what we need to be doing for our students, we need to do for ourselves. We need to just do it, learn it, get better at it with every iteration. And next thing you know, it'll be all taking off, and it'll be second nature. It'll be just the new way you do things.
Yeah, this is something I tell people all the time who are talking about starting a YouTube channel and are concerned that their quality is not good enough. Oh, I'll start it when I have that camera. I'll start it when I can afford a good microphone. I'll start it once I'm really good at editing. And you're never going to get good at any of this until you start just doing it. And it's obviously a bit different for teachers versus someone starting a YouTube channel. On the YouTube side of things, when you start out, you're going to suck. That's fine because nobody's there to watch it anyway, so don't worry about it. Obviously, on the teaching side, it's a bit different because people are going to watch it from the beginning. But you know what? The only way you're going to get better is to do it. Nobody starts as some rock star presenter. Everybody starts never having done this before, and you just have to start it and accept that it's going to get better, and that's just all there is to it. That's just the way these things work.
I guess we would. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say. I mean, it's hard for us to have this conversation without, invoking the Khan Academy, right? I mean, he started that whole entire thing off of just making videos because he got tired of teaching kids the same thing over and over again. So he just taught it one time, recorded it, and then when his buddies tried to send his friends to him, he's like, "Here, just send him this video. This was me teaching you, so just send him that." And then it just kind of blew up.
And I don't know how true this is, but as I understand it, he started recording in his closet surrounded by clothing, so he had good quality sound, recording his screen and talking into a microphone while surrounded by clothing in his bedroom closet. That's how he started, because quality matters, right? He wanted to have the good quality audio, and that was the best way to do it. And now look, that's a massive organization now. No, that's super cool. Bob had asked about transcribing the shows and getting a transcription of your recorded session that you've done. I will tell you that YouTube will auto-transcribe everything that you upload. It's not great, but it does a pretty good job, and you can download that and clean it up, and if you want to, and then that is going to be completely free. If you want to pay a little bit, there's a company called rev.com, R-E-V, rev.com, and they have a 10 cents per minute auto transcription, which is like YouTube's, but a little bit better. And then there's $1 a minute, so that can get quite expensive, but $1 a minute is a human transcription. So depends on kind of what your need is and how much work you want to put back into cleaning it up, whether you want it to be perfect or if those weird words that don't fit anywhere suddenly show up as gobbledygook on screen is acceptable. And that's just up to you and what your content is. But you can do it anywhere from free to $1 a minute through Rev. And then there are services that are like $3 a minute, and you can get it transcribed into different languages and translated to different languages and so on. There's a lot of options out there, but YouTube's free, rev.com for 10 cents a minute for automated, $1 a minute for hand done. And that's a good way to go if you really want to do that.
See, that's important to know because the Americans with Disabilities Act requires us to make everything accessible.
Okay.
We're not supposed to have videos unless they are closed captioned or have transcription.
Interesting. Okay, in that case, then again, if there's no budget and you have to do it yourself, then you let YouTube transcribe it for free. You can download the file from YouTube, clean it up, or they actually have a pretty good interface where you can just go onto the screen and you see your video and the transcription next to it or the closed captions next to it, and you can make your corrections. That actually works out pretty well. Or you can download it, clean it up, and re-upload it, or you can have a service do it. But yeah, so that's good to know. If it's required and you need to do that, then yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that. See, I don't have a YouTube channel, so.
Right.
But I will.
Yeah, the automated system, it's not awful. It's not perfect. It's funny because you watch pretty much any YouTube video that you watch, you can turn on closed captions, even if they haven't done it manually. Unless the YouTuber has specifically turned that off, I'm pretty sure it's on by default for it to automatically do it, and then it's just there. And you can always tell which ones are automated because there's lots of mistakes in them, but it's enough to get the general gist of it, but that's probably not quite enough for the ADA. So I would say at that level, you would definitely want to go in and clean it up or just have it done separately.
Well, I would have to because I speak Scienceese.
Right. Well, the cool thing with Rev, I'll say if you're using the manual service, so the $1 a minute, which again is quite expensive, and I have no idea if they have any kind of educational pricing. They might, but they're using freelancers all over the world. Basically, anybody who wants to can be a Rev transcriber, and it's it's like an Uber type of a thing. They get paid a portion of that. Anybody who wants to can, if they drop below a certain quality, because every transcription is reviewed. If they drop below a certain quality, they get booted. But when you order it, so let's say that I've got a video on YouTube, I go to Rev and I say I'm willing to pay $1 a minute for this, and I put in the link, there's a field where you can put in specific words that are used that might not be obvious or might be complicated to spell. So then the transcriber goes, oh, okay, when they use this big scientific term, this is the word, this is how it's spelled, I don't have to figure it out or get it wrong. So there is that option as well. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
We've mentioned YouTube a lot of times. There's loads of people out there with content. You know, being an educator myself and understanding the amount of workload that we're all going through at the moment, you know, one of the things I would say is you know, look to curate. Obviously, you know, appropriately signpost where it came from, but do curate from other sources and use those in those teaching environments as well, just to try and cut down a little bit on that workload, but to share some of the great work that's out there as well and draw attention to it. But just remember that there's, you know, just like there's a community to reach out to for support, there's people out there creating content as well that we can draw on and that we can share and that we can keep our workload manageable. What is a tough time for us as educators as well? We're going through the same issues that our kids are going through. So it's a great way to manage that kind of workload piece.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I want to hit a couple of questions that have come in from the live chat, and then we're going to move on to the next big topic. A couple of tech questions. Tyron Watzinger had asked, would it also be possible to record, so we're back to talking about the recording the show, to record with OBS simultaneously to Zoom, I guess, in a higher resolution to edit it later. So OBS is Open Broadcasting Service System, Open Broadcast something, software maybe, and it is a free app that you can use to broadcast your screen, your cameras, whatever, onto whatever platform you want to. It's an open source program. It's pretty cool, actually. It's pretty powerful. And one of the things that it will do is record your show locally, so you get that live recording locally. I would say you probably wouldn't use that in conjunction with Zoom, just because you'd basically just be feeding your screen, your Zoom screen, into OBS. If that's all you're going to do with it, then I would say just use ScreenFlow. You get and I recognize ScreenFlow is not free where OBS is, but I think it's going to be less system intensive, less resource intensive, and give you a better quality. There's some cool things about ScreenFlow. When it's capturing, it's not just a video file. It is actually this weird operating system level file where you can do things like make your mouse bigger after the fact. There's a lot of things that you can do in there. Have it automatically pull up keyboard shortcuts. So if you hit Command W, you can have ScreenFlow automatically put Command W on the screen for you, which happens after the fact. So there's a lot of advantages to it. But if you don't have the option, if you don't have any budget at all for it, then you can try OBS. But again, it might be a little bit too taxing for the system. But it's worth looking at. It's worth trying for sure. And Diana M asked, was there a question?
I was just going to throw out real quickly, if you're on a Mac, QuickTime does video screen recording as well, just natively right within QuickTime. So if you're on a budget, you're not going to want to buy another tool or whatever, but you're on a Mac, hit up a YouTube tutorial on how to record your screen with QuickTime.
Great.
And you can make that happen very quickly.
Yep, very good. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Tyron asked, would it also be oh, sorry, that was the wrong question. Diana M says, how do you manage troubleshooting technical problems with software with students during assignments? I'm not sure if she means necessarily the broadcast, like right now having a technical issue versus troubleshooting challenges the students are having. But I mean, gosh, it's like troubleshooting anything else. You hopefully don't have to do it live. Like right now in the middle of this live show, if I suddenly had a tech issue, that'd be a challenge, and I would kind of have to slow things down or stop for a moment and figure that out. There's not an easy solution to that. If you've got a technical issue, you just got to work through it. But I think one of the keys is to try not to get flustered, which is very hard. It's very easy to say, very hard to do. If you're talking to your class and suddenly something goes wrong, it's easy for me to say, oh, just tell the class to sit tight for a minute, you'll figure it out. And meanwhile, you're going, oh, this is wrong. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to figure it out. So it's tough, but there's not much you can do except to just take a deep breath and sort through it. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Here's an interesting idea, though, that dawned on me. I mean, there's a lot of, just in thinking back to my own high school experience and with my kids, you've got multiple teachers. I mean, not all the time and not for all subjects, but sometimes there's a couple teachers teaching the same subject. And so you can pair up. I mean, why not? Because when you're in the classroom, taking 2 classrooms with 20 kids in each classroom and making a 40-kid classroom, that's kind of a nightmare in the real space of things. But online, it's a whole nother story. Having 40 kids in an online thing isn't quite as hard if you've got 2 teachers in there. One can be instructing, the other one can be addressing any of the technical issues or the conversations and managing it. So you've got kind of a producer presenter relationship going on with two teachers doing it at the same time. And then you can just swap back and forth. You can trade. I'll do this session while you're doing producer, and then we'll switch. Now I'm the producer and now you're on. And what that also gives you is variety for the kids. And we know from neuroscience that variety and changing things up quickly, keeping things moving along is really, really important when it comes to this kind of stuff. So that's another interesting way you can do if you can partner up with another teacher. It doesn't even have to be in your own school now that I think about it, right? I mean, how fun would this be, right? If you got another entomologist from Australia or from the UK or something, and you're teaching at the exact same time, right, in a classroom, you'd probably get a whole boatload of people jumping in going, wow, I want to hear from both of these teachers at the same time and go through their process. So I mean, I think these are the things that get me excited about technology and about online and us moving in this space, is that it opens up the design and the things that we can do, and we're not confined to just the classroom and the way that we've done it for years. It's not just cookie cutter. Take what we've done, plug it in online. It's now we've got this all these other options and this variety that's opened up to us now in a good way, not in a negative way.
That's a really good point. This whole moving online that many teachers are being forced to do may seem like a negative in the beginning, and certainly is going to be a lot of work in the beginning, but it really does open opportunities that simply do not exist in the classroom. The perfect example, bringing in a professor from the other side of the world. You just can't do that. You can't fly somebody in from the other side of the world for a 1-hour lecture, but just like we've got Will here calling in from China, we can certainly bring him in and it doesn't cost us anything, and Will just has to get up a little bit extra early in the morning. So it's really phenomenal that we have that capability. And once you start thinking about the advantages of this online platform, it really can expand in a fantastic way.
There actually is something like that here in North America, although I think it's worldwide as well. It's called Skype a Scientist, where you can use either Skype or FaceTime. And I've done it for a few years, where you as an educator sign up with the organization. It's called Skype a Scientist. And you sign up, here are my fields. So for me, entomology, botany. And then schools all over the world can see it and go, hey, that looks cool. And they click and they send me a message and say, I have a fourth grade class or whatever level. And let's work out a time and a date. And then we get online at the same time with either Skype or FaceTime. They both work fine.
Cool.
And I get to talk to their whole class. And so I'll hold up big bug specimens of mine, show them my bug collection, tell them a story. They ask me questions live. We have divers right off our coast that are part of this program too. So the kids can Skype a diver when they're diving, which is just amazing to me. The equipment exists. Yep. And they can actually talk. Yeah. And so that's a really cool thing. So that's what you're saying, that is out there. Not everybody does it. I think more people should do it.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
That's incredible. Neat. Very cool. Very cool. I think we're probably going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff just suddenly popping up because of current situation and needing to deal with it. I want to remind people who are watching live that if you do have questions, we do want to hear them. Just drop them into the live chat. There's someone in the chat called Jake Guptill. If you see him in there, just start typing Jake, and you'll see his name pop up. Highlight his name, put his name in front of your question, then he'll know to drop it into my questions list. He's moderating for me, so please do that. And again, for those of you not watching live, just drop your comments into your questions into the comments, and we'll do our best to get to those at a later time. Let's talk about kind of the psychological, emotional side of this and the reach. And then we'll start with the reach. And in the beginning or earlier on, Brent brought up people with disabilities and trying to reach them. And that is its own topic. But what about simply people who don't have internet access? And this is a topic that I just had a discussion with on Twitter yesterday, had a debate with my wife about it last night. If you are a school, and this apparently is happening right now, there are schools who, of course, have children who don't have internet access. It's just whether they either are living too rural to have it, they can't afford it, whatever the case may be, they don't have internet access. So I've heard that there are schools who are saying, well, we cannot put classes online. And since kids can't come into the classroom, they are essentially being forced to close schools. And that's, it's terrible on many counts, right? Kids are now forced to not learn. That sucks. What about the kids? Do we say, well, we should just teach to those who can, but then that's leaving out those who can't get to it? How do you handle that? And I know this is going to be a big discussion among a lot of schools who have children who don't have access and how they deal with it. I know we were talking about before the show went live, the idea of the soft closure where this is possible. There's schools, I believe it's Utah, that have done a soft closure where the campus is actually still open for students who either need somewhere to go during the day, need to get there to eat, because a lot of kids, of course, rely on school meals to eat. And I would argue that that also could be used for those who don't have internet access. The bus systems are still running. They might only be running 3 or 4 kids in a bus, but whatever, it gets them to school and they still have access to the school's computers and internet and so on. But at large, this is an issue. I wanted to talk about this a little bit. How do we manage the kids who simply can't get online or don't have the computer and so on? What do we do about them? Big question. Will, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, so one of the things that's happened over here, and I don't know how feasible it is for schools in America, but we've actually sent textbooks out to families.
Okay.
So we've done that really on 2 levels, blending online and offline learning. Brent mentioned this asynchronous idea as well. So blending those 2 things. We just knew for certain levels of kids, they needed the textbook. We needed to be following what was going on in curriculum. But it's also a good way to reach families that don't have access to the internet. And here in China, that sometimes is about being in a rural area and just not having that access. For us, the government have been amazing, and that was a government push. So kids all over the country have received the textbooks that they needed. But it does just strike me, if it's possible for schools to do it, getting printed resources out there and sending them out is one way to do it. And then they're able to keep up and keep going. And of course, we've got telephones. We can pick them up. We can have those conversations as well. I mentioned that a lot of educators have broken things down, so they were doing those small tutorial groups and those one-on-one sessions. That can take place on the phone as easy as it can over Skype or a platform like this.
Okay. Great. Brent, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just that there's so much involved in it, and that I don't even know what we can do to address it today. I think obviously it's just something that we need to be aware of, and maybe by just bringing awareness to it, because I hadn't even thought of it until all of a sudden I started hearing people talking about it. I think I saw it on Twitter, and then I heard about it in a school district in my area that was struggling with that. And so, because it's a legal issue. It's to the point where if they tried to go online and for some reason a kid couldn't access it, there's a legal liability. And so the school districts themselves are struggling with trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this? And maybe there's some people out there who can step up and say, I've got an extra laptop I can spare, and maybe we can do like a collection drive or something and help those kids that don't have it. I know a lot of the schools also have labs with, laptops, Chromebooks, whatever, that are probably just sitting and collecting dust now. And if everybody's getting sent home, it's probably a logistical nightmare, but there's got to be a way to get those laptops in the hands of those kids that need it. Because not every kid does, but the ones that do, and then you risk it not coming back. And I get all of that. But in times like this, you would think that would be a risk worth taking in order to keep some continuity and give the most vulnerable of those in our community some hope, something they, because everybody's nervous, everybody's freaked out. Learning's going to be really hard anyways, with people stressed out and full of anxiety. And I don't think anybody at administrative levels having to make these decisions, I don't think they're taking that into consideration. And, and it's a reality, and it's something we have to deal with, but I have no clue what the answer is.
Yeah. I do think that the Utah approach, and I don't know how broad that's extending as far as if they have access to the library, if they have access to the computer labs, whatever it might be. But clearly at least the situation we're in right now, this isn't a massive plague where nobody can talk to anybody and we all have to lock ourselves at home. The whole thing that's happening right now is social distancing and trying to have as few people together at once as possible and have as small groups together as possible. And so if you have, say, even 80% of your students can stay home and only 20% are at school, that's a lot fewer people, and they're all at a lot lower risk. The teachers are still there being paid. The cafeteria staff is still there, maybe not making, obviously not making as much food, but everybody's still working, and we're still getting the kids educated, which at the end of the day is what matters. That's why these schools are there. And to stop teaching, to me, just seems unacceptable. There has to be a solution. And I'm not saying it's easy, but to stop is just not acceptable. We can't do that. It's one thing to take a couple weeks off, but we can't just say, we'll be back next year or something. It just doesn't work that way.
Sadly, I've even heard people calling for that, though. We should just shut everything down for, the next few months. And it's like, well,
You can't.
I think people forget what the ramifications of that might be, right? I mean, you've got a whole bunch of kids with nothing to do. Oh, that can't possibly cause a problem. What happens when you normally get a bunch of kids together, right? I mean, the collective IQ drops significantly most of the time. So
Yeah.
I have some kids, I can say that, I know.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's the kids who maybe they have all the technology in the world at home. Maybe they come from wealthy parents. They've got everything that they need, but the parents work. They both have to work. And if you're a young kid, you can't leave a 5-year-old at home all day long. They have to go somewhere. And if you don't have family to step in, or you don't have daycare access, you got to figure something out. And so putting them back in school where they're supposed to be with a lot less kids around, that seems like a pretty decent solution to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but.
Yeah, I think it's above my pay grade. Sorry.
Well, we may not be here to solve the problems, but we're here to offer some suggestions, and hopefully it can help somebody out. Jessica had a question. It says, in your opinion, how young do you think a child can be taught online? Could, say, a preschool or pre-K teacher do this? Could they teach a preschooler online? Will, I think you've got the experience in this space. Why don't you go for it?
Absolutely. I've seen some amazing lessons going out there. I mean, from accessing apps and using those kind of things to engage the kids and work with them. But definitely as low as grade 1, I've seen children engaged in doing PE lessons online, going to virtual libraries and reading books together, having story time with their teachers as their teachers are screencasting to them. It can absolutely be done. One of the cool things that I've seen from educators down in the primary level as well is flipping the classroom. So they've done a little bit about what we were talking about earlier, videoing themselves, doing some dance moves, doing some PE moves, sharing that, getting the kids to post back, and building a real sense of community around what's happening in that space. So absolutely, we can engage online with children as young as primary and pre-K. The other thing for me just to kind of put out there is, when we're talking about online learning, it doesn't always have to be live streaming. It doesn't always have to be this instantaneous communication. Loads of educators are making great use of flipped classroom, where we video something, post it, and then meet with the kids afterwards or have some other form of interaction. Okay. That's been amazingly useful down at that lower age range from what I'm seeing over here in China.
Okay, very cool. Hey, interesting question coming in from Jake, our moderator. He's asking if you need to have a different license, like the teaching license, the whatever credentials you get to be able to go work at a high school or at a university. Is there something unique that teachers need to have to be qualified to teach online, or to be able to legally teach in a public school online? Or is that just the same? It's just, if you're a teacher, you're a teacher.
It depends on where their education comes from. So if they're in a K-12 classroom here in the States, the teachers, public K-12, the teacher's got to be credentialed, whether it's online or not. Colleges, universities, no, there's no credential.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine that may vary depending on your region, but yeah, in public schools, and obviously they're going to have different rules, and it's, as long as there's no difference between teaching online or teaching in person, credential's a credential. That would be good. So, following up on the idea of the students who don't have access, that in itself is going to be emotionally trying for them. Suddenly they're the outlier. They stand out. There's something different about them. in the classroom today, there's always kids who are uncomfortable for whatever reason, there's social anxiety and so on. And I know for a lot of kids, a lot of people, they're going to quite like the idea of doing their schoolwork at home, not having to be in the classroom. So it might be an advantage for them. But there's going to be a lot of kids who really thrive on that in-classroom environment. I'm here with my peers. I'm here with my teacher that I can just grab in the hallway and ask a question. And all of that is basically evaporated overnight. And while we aren't psychologists and certainly can't answer the questions of how do you help kids who need that help, I think we can try to address the question of how do we help identify those kids, because that's going to be a big challenge. If in the classroom we can see 30 faces looking back at us and identify this kid's not quite paying attention, looks a little sad, maybe we should figure something out, we're not going to have that online. So what tools do we have to help identify those who need extra attention and extra help? And even as educators, this is going to be tough for teachers. Suddenly you're isolated at home for weeks on end possibly. How do we deal with that?
I'll jump in and I'll just say that I think it's a collective responsibility. I think it's the parents, I think it's the students, and I think it's the instructors and the teachers. And I think it is already, right? This isn't anything new, and needing to go online doesn't cause this. But the really great thing about the technology is that it's so much easier to be connected with the whole group, right? It's like bringing the community together to say, how's your kid doing, right? You could, again, there's a lot of creative things you can do to utilize the tech. Maybe you engage one kid with another kid, right? Interview Johnny, right? And then here's the question you should ask him. Or here are 3 questions you should ask him. And then tomorrow I want you to come back and introduce him, right? This is like adult stuff that you normally see, like icebreakers and whatever. But some of those silly things can still be used with kids too, right? Whatever it is, having the kids talk to each other and engage with each other and have them present back is I think one way you can do that, because then you can see, right? You as an instructor will then be able to see the engagement. How well did they do? How well are they presenting, or how well are they engaging with the content? And I think that's one way, even if it's not visible, right? It doesn't even have to be video. Maybe they present a recorded audio file or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to think outside the box here, but even if you can't physically see them, by the work that you're having them do and the quality that they're sending back, you're going to get kind of an idea. And then if you've got the parents engaged in a part or a section of the online community, you can reach out to them and say, hey, how's Johnny doing with this whole online thing? Is everybody okay? Boy, it's been a real struggle for me as an instructor. And I just want to make sure that everybody else is like, not as, okay. And I think like anything else, it's just basic human communications and just engaging and building relationships with people.
Yeah,
easier said than done. I know.
Directly, Joseph. I mean, I'm six weeks into quarantine of varying levels. I came back, did 14 days absolute quarantine, just as we were asked to do, down to then being able to go out every couple of days. Now I can go out to shop as I want, but I'm still not back in work. I think, as I was telling Joseph yesterday, my family are on the other side of the country because my wife had to return to her school to go through the same quarantine process to look after the kids. And I'd really echo what's being said. It's been an amazing lifeline for me to be able to talk to colleagues, from both in Chengdu and on the other side of the country, and just have chats daily, whether it's about planning, just checking up on each other and seeing how we're doing. But also for the kids, they can engage in group work just as we're talking to each other now. We can organize forum posts. We can organize all of that kind of collaborative learning that we would do offline as well. But I really would just put a shout out there to say, as much as we're talking about kids being isolated, let's just remember that we might have colleagues that all of a sudden are by themselves, that aren't getting out there and speaking to people, and actually just picking up the phone and saying hi, checking on how they're doing, and looking after each other is such a big thing that we can do for each other at this point in time, and just support each other in our mental health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. You know what? an interesting thought just occurred to me, since I kind of come from the corporate training side of the world and this learning and development side of things. And then we've got the this whole education side of it, and a lot of it, interrelates and overlaps. But from the corporate side of things, we're trying to figure out how to teach people how to work from home, right? So that's the big thing in our industry. All of a sudden, you've got this massive amount of people that all of a sudden are saying, "Don't come into work from home," and they're like, "How do I be productive?" And so there's that going on. And then there's, oh my God, all of a sudden the schools are being shut down. How do I teach? How do I maintain and be productive? And then how do the kids, or, even in higher ed, how do people in school, how do they stay productive? So there's all of a sudden this clash of everything happening at once. And it might be an interesting opportunity for the learning and development on the corporate side of the world to maybe somehow connect with educators, and maybe there's some sort of like exchange program or something we can come up with where you pair up with a corporate training person, maybe helps out an instructor, maybe they become their producer for the day, so where they teach each other how to do certain things, and so that the instructor can just teach and then let the corporate training person deal with the software and be the producer in the background. I don't know. It just kind of struck me as we were talking earlier that again, I don't know logistically how we would handle that, but I'd certainly be willing to help if anybody wants that kind of help. There's a lot of folks out there that I know have some time on their hands and, they'd be able to step up and help with that. And I'm sure they'd love to. It's a learning experience for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, we've come to the end of the questions that I had put together. If anybody who's watching live does have any questions they wanted to get answered and didn't get a chance to ask, get them in the chat now, please, so that we get those addressed. But let's just wrap this up with any closing final thoughts that we might have. And Bob, I'll start with you in case there's any questions that you have that didn't get addressed throughout this session. Is there anything, any overarching question that you need to still get answered today?
I think I got a lot of my questions answered, more than I thought would be answered, really. Because most of mine were technical. How do I put this stuff together to make it work?
Sure.
And I think the answer there is use what I have and just dive in and do it and see what goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and YouTube is, of course, a great resource for when you do want to up your level a little bit. There's a lot of YouTubers out there, myself included, that have all kinds of videos about how to do live streaming, how to set up cameras and microphones and lighting and so on. It's an incredible resource for information. There's so much good stuff on YouTube. So when you do want to up your game, the information is there. It's all free. But yeah, don't feel like you have to. Start with what you've got. Absolutely. Very good. Well, thank you, Bob, for bringing up the question in the first place and for emailing me on Friday. I think it's really great that you did that, and I'm glad we were able to pull this together. Brent, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would just say, those are the easiest things. Don't be afraid. You're not alone. Just try it. Push that record button. You can always hit the delete button. People are afraid. I'm not afraid. And, here's another one, too. If you're afraid of what you might look like on camera, you can do a live stream, or you can record just the audio, right? Put up a slide instead of your face, instead of the webcam, right? And then just talk
Very
over
true.
a picture, right? You can do that. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of different creative solutions. And I think at a time when things are stressful, it's hard to be creative. But there's a ton of help out there. Communities are going to help you out a lot. I am happy to help. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm almost even a little bit afraid to even say that, is if there's a whole ton of people out there watching it. But like I said, I've got a big network of folks that I know are super happy to help because they love helping each other. So I think in this particular situation, we'd all be happy to step up and offer advice, tips. I do a live stream most days anyways for my network, but I'm opening it wide open. And for the next 30 days or so, however long this whole massive quarantine goes on, this will be the topic of choice. 30 minutes every day, 8 a.m. Pacific time. I go live on a platform called Crowdcast. And if you want to just jump in and hang out with us and you just want to collaborate, commiserate, you know, whatever you need at the time, that's what we're going to be there for. So, and I appreciate you.
How do people find that, Brent? What's the address? What's the URL?
Oh yeah, sorry. Well, you can go to my community. Bob just jumped in and joined. It's thelearntrain.community. It's fun to see him drop in there. Just know that a lot of the early conversation that's gone on in there is geared towards the corporate side of things. But if you're an educator, if you're a K through 12 teacher, don't be afraid. I've started to add some new topics in there that are going to meet this need and help you out. And it's the network has a paid plans. Just ignore those. Do the free one. Just jump in for free. I don't want, the paid is for friends that like to support what I do and colleagues that support and help cover platform costs and things like that. I don't expect that from anybody in this type of situation at all. So jump in to that, ask your questions. People will jump in and answer them for you. And everybody is very, very giving right now and happy to help. And I always love learning new stuff from folks. And so to have a whole flood of teachers come in and hang out with us would be a dream. So tons of fun.
Thanks. So we'll make sure we get those links down in the description below as well. Before we wrap up with you, Will, there is another question that came in I want to hit. Aaron Parecki asked, she says, I'm on the corporate training side of things. Would love to know more classroom tips for making things interactive, since normally I do these in person and a presentation is enough. It's how do you keep it interactive? It's easier in the classroom to get people to ask questions and engage. That might be a bit harder when you're doing things online. Are there any tips to getting people involved and keeping it interactive?
Just to keep everything tight, I'm just going to reiterate that resource that I dropped in earlier, and it's also in the Airtable resource. Her name is Cassie Labori, and she's got free resources on her website from how to get started on Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx or whatever. And then she's got a great book out there too, like 50 unique ways to engage your audience online or to move your classroom online. I can't remember exactly what it is. Sorry, Cassie. But the link is there. And I mean, she is amazing. She's done this for so many years. There's another woman in the UK, Joe Cook. Lightbulb Joe is her site. She has a community as well, and she has a ton of resources also out there. So if you can't remember all those things that I've thrown out there, and I don't remember to drop them in the chat, just reach me offline or on Twitter. Just hit me up there, or again, jump into the learntrain.community, and I will just sort of be your conduit, and I'll point you to all of the brightest people that can give you all the things that you need to get going.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Thank you very much. All right, Will, let's wrap this thing up. I know you've got somewhere to go as well, so perfect timing. Any parting thoughts for our viewers today?
I think just, echoing what everybody else has said. There's no self-destruct button that I can find on my MacBook. So, dive in there, get on with it. You're not going to break the internet, that's for sure. But just, remember, you're not by yourself. And if you're not feeling confident enough to reach out and engage with some of these groups that are out there at first, ask Google, ask YouTube. You're going to get a lot of resources back that way. But just remember that there's groups of educators, we're hearing about people from industry that be happy to help. Reach out, because you're not by yourself. And there are a lot of people out there that can support and will support. But most importantly, don't be scared. Don't be put off by the tech. Just feel free to get out there and do it. Yeah. And remember that your kids want to see you. They want to hear from you. They can't be with you. So don't be afraid about just putting yourself out there and really keeping those connections alive with our school communities and with our communities generally.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again, all of you, for being here today. I hope this was a useful conversation for those who were watching live and will watch later. This is it's uncharted territory we're in here, trying to move this many people into an online learning platform overnight, quite literally in some cases, is definitely a challenge. Well, one of the other guests who was going to be with us today had to drop out yesterday because she learned that her school was going online starting Monday, and she needed to help everybody do that. She no longer had the option to hang out with us and talk about it. So it's happening right now very, very quickly. And I know Monday's going to be rough for a lot of people who do have to go online right away. But, we'll just jump in and make the best of it. So thank you again, everybody. Really, really appreciate you being here. Thank you, audience. Thanks for the questions. And of course, if you watching live or watching this not live, any questions you have that didn't get addressed today, just drop them into the comments and we will do our absolute best to address them. All the links that we talked about, we're going to get updated into the description real quick here so that anything you want to click on, those links will be there. So thanks again, everybody. Super appreciate it. Take care, guys. China, go have some coffee. Hopefully, it's now a cracking 6:30 in the morning for you, so you should be ready for that cup now. All right, guys.
Well, thank you very much, Joseph.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.